And good evening, everyone. Do you remember? This is the third night of September. Okay, sana napakanta kayo doon, no? So, welcome to the 12th episode of Privacy Fridays, back-to-back with FightBack Cybersecurity here at the BounceBack Network. Again, made in partnership with NADPOP, the National Association of Data Protection Officers, the Philippines, PH-CERT, the Philippine Computer Emergency Response Team, and of course, Bluepoint Foundation, our partner for e-learning. Okay, I'd like to welcome first, ladies first, our co-host, Miss Arnie Barcelo. Magandang gabi.
Yes, good evening, magandang gabi sa ating lahat, sa ating tagapanood, tagapakinig ng Privacy Fridays and FightBack Cybersecurity. Ito yung favorite kong araw, Friday, kasi natututo ka na, natatawa ka pa. Natutuwa ka pa. Ayun. So, yan po.
Sister Arnie, introduce mo yung co-host natin na susunod sa'yo. Mamili ka sa kanilang tatlo ngayon. Okay?
Okay. So, mamimili ako. Yung gusto ko sana yung speaker. Ayoko kasi umabsent sa klase ni yung speaker.
Unahin natin.
Pero yung classmate ko muna, okay lang ba? Yung classmate ko na lang, simple lang siya i-introduce Yung speaker, mahaba yung kanyang profile. Anyway, ang aking partner sa Korean novela. No, it's not okay. Sa script po namin, sa aming NPC Comics, Mr. Abet de Cruz ng PH-CERT, ang director ng PH-CERT. Hi, Abet. Bago mo.
Hindi natin na-play yung welcome na gusto mo, parang kasi Arnie Barcelo.
Oo nga, kasi nasa labas nga pala ako nasa stage, nasa backstage pa. Anyways.
I-play natin siya. I-play natin kay Mr. Speaker mamaya, yung wali-wali.
Sige. So, good evening po sa lahat. Friday na naman. Thank you for bearing with us. Ano po kami ngayon ni Maring Arnie? Estudyante
kami.
We will be schooled tonight about the Data Lifecycle.
Yes.
Telenovela daw. So dapat Arnie anyong chuseo.
Ano rin sa'yo? Anong meron sa'yo? Anyway.
Pakilala mo yung ating port host.
Okay. So, introduce ko yung na-miss natin. Ako, hindi kumpleto ang barkada dahil wala siya last time. But tonight, nandito po siya. And the whole show, nandito daw siya. So, tuwang-tuwa po kaming lahat. At nabiyayaan niya kami ng kanyang presensya. The one, the only, Attorney Kicks.
Hello! Good evening sa lahat.
Madaming baon to. Nakapagpakasyon.
Talagang parang Kicks Almighty talaga eh. Talagang nakakasilaw.
Maano naman. Well, ganun talaga pag bagong pahinga. So, may bright and refreshed. Ganyan.
Yan. Oo, tama.
Napaka-bright ng aura mo ngayon, Attorney Kicks.
Oo.
Pati yung kanyang lamp sa likod, bright din, no? Tingnan mo.
Oh, yan.
Tama, no?
Lamp yan, Attorney Kiko, di ba?
Lamp shade yan. Nirescue ko yan sa mga epektos ng nanay.
Uy. Mahal.
Heirloom pala yan.
Heirloom.
Attorney Kicks,
Yung laptop ba kasama yun?
Hindi.
At Attorney Kicks, baka merong treasure map sa loob pagka binuksan mo. Yung nakatago kaya ni nanay. No?
Baka.
Hindi
ko pa titingnan.
Rub it 3 times.
Pwede rin. Sino lalabas? Ating speaker, baka lumabas. No? Attorney Kicks, pakilala mo na yung ating speaker for the night. Actually, lead trainer, no? Meron po kaming gagawing magandang ngayon. We're going to do a team teaching. Okay? So, ang opponent niyan si Don. Yan, ang ating speaker. Na-introduce ni Attorney Kiko. Okay?
Yan. Our teacher for tonight, our lead teacher for tonight is the Godfather, the real Godfather of Philippine Cybersecurity. Siya, the OG, the one and only Lito Averia.
Yan. Welcome, Don Vito!
Yan ang na-miss ni Juan. Magandang gabi sa lahat.
Para sa iyan talaga si Arnie Barcelo, pero siyempre yung speaker natin, kailangan talaga ng grand entrance na gano'n, no? Talagang banda po.
Wait, pangalawang linggo ko ng speaker, ha?
Back to back eh.
Sam, nahalata na, Sam.
Wala kasi yung tataas na kami. Baka gusto mong gawin 3-pit yan dito. Di ba, gawin mo na yung mga
Pwede, maghahanap pa tayo ng presentation.
3-pit mo na kasi. Walang gustong humawak ng privacy program eh.
Ayos na yan. Masaya na.
May quiz study pa ako.
May mga tayo. Yung mga greeters na tayo agad. Yan. Sir Jerry. Good evening, Sir Jerry.
Magandang gabi po.
Saan man po kami ngayon. Salamat by YouTube. So, dumadami yung ating mga YouTube followers. Maraming salamat po. I-share niyo po ito na i-share, no? Para po marami po matuto at matuwa. Yan. Di ba tama yan?
Yeah. May following na may following na pala si Averia, Tingnan mo yun.
Ma'am Marisol, magandang gabi po.
Ayan, magandang gabi.
Good evening, ating regular. Dapat bigyan natin ng matinding digital badge.
Salamat sa pagsubaybay.
And meron din tayong unidentified. Ito, ang galing talaga ng privacy ng StreamYard, no? So, pagka wala ka ng consent, hindi lalabas ang pangalan mo.
Kung ayaw mong ilagay ang pangalan mo, hindi daw. Sir Jerry Tancinco is our bye from Cebu. Thank you for tuning in again tonight.
Ito si Ma'am Lisa, nandito na naman. Magandang gabi po. Yan, Ma'am Lisa Alcanieses. Yan, magandang gabi. Wherever you are, Ma'am. Sabi naman kung nasaan kayo.
Kasama si Lisa sa Advisory Council sa ACG.
Talaga? Sakto. Mamaya, log in na rin yung mga friends natin sa IPMS naman. So, sa Advisory Council din. Saka, shout out. By the way, belated happy birthday, Colonel Alba. Magandang gabi po. Kung nasa may enjoy your day po. Salamat po sa ito kilala natin ito. Dito, Abet. Attorney Kicks.
Pero di ba yan yung kontribida dati sa mga lumang pelikula?
Iba yun.
Ernie Reyes yun.
Hindi, pero Ernie Imperial, di ba?
Sir Ernie, magandang gabi po sa inyo.
Ernie, kumusta?
Buti naka-join kayo, no? So, alas kayo na lang si Abit mamaya sa kasi dito. Kasi Attorney Kicks. Pinase, no? Good evening talaga. No? So, alam niyo, September na.
Oo nga.
Nag-start yung Bernards, di ba? So, third night of September ngayon. So, hindi papatak yung Privacy Fridays ng 21st night pero pwede pa rin natin patutugin yun, di ba? Kaya baka makapiright kita tayo ng
Nakakatuwa yung mga memes ni Jose Marichan Merong naglagay na Jose Marichan sa labas ng bintana niya, nakasilip.
Pagbukas ng pinto, kumakanta, di ba? So, kanita siya ng mga Pinoy, no?
Dito nga sa akin, maglalagay na ako ng poster doon sa gate ko May Jose Marichan.
Sabi ng iba, beautiful girl naman daw.
Pwede.
Pwede ba yun na lang? Wag na
Pagka
yung,
panahon ng Miss Universe, no? Pag Miss You, panahon ng Miss Universe.
wag na yung Christmas in our house.
DJ, pakicue nga yung beautiful girl mamaya pag pakakilima mo.
Di ba ikaw ang sound engineer, Abet? Di ba?
Ha?
Ikaw ang sound engineer natin.
Frustrated sound engineer.
Sir Edmundo Tukay, good evening po. Ayan. Mabuhay din po kayo. Good evening daw sa ating speaker. So, stay on po kayo dahil napakaganda po ng topic ng ating lead trainer and speaker ngayon, si Don Lito Averia, no? Yung Data Lifecycle. Okay? So, without further ado, let's get on with it. Gusto na yung Don Lito, team teaching So, may iwan po kaming 5 dito. Pagpasensyahan nyo, nagliliit yung pero
magmimeron lang kami, magmimeron yan.
Ayan. So, take it away, Don Lito.
Okay. Ayan, magandang gabi ho. Sa inyo lahat. Balik po tayo, back to basics muna, no? Kasi medyo karaniwan nakakalimutan ito. Okay. So, data privacy and the data life cycle. Well, of course, basic question is, what is data privacy, no? So, it's defined as the right to be let alone. No, the most comprehensive of rights and the right most favored by civilized men. Ito sumikat ito. This definition is about 100 years old. It was written by Justice Louis Brandeis in the case of Olmsted versus United States. So let's take a look at the backstory behind this definition. Si Attorney Kicks would be very familiar with the backstory.
Ayan. So in Olmsted, tawag to, you have a case where the government wanted to find a way to get around the requirement of a warrant before it gets to invade your privacy. So in this case, there is there was a desire to get that information and use that information. And before that, there really was the presumption in favor of the law enforcement officer. Na even if the law enforcement officer broke the law to get the evidence, okay lang. And then what happened here is that Justice Brandeis wrote the opposition to the the dissenting opinion to the court's decision, because the court here said they could use the wiretap information. But later, we came to understand that that's not the way we're supposed to do things. No, so now we have the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine, we have the exclusionary rule, which means that law enforcers have to follow the law if they want to do it, if they want that evidence to be admissible in trial. So dito sa Pilipinas, there was a similar case, no? Yung tatay ni Chel Jokno, si Jose Jokno, then the Secretary of Justice, went after Harry Stonehill. Now, Harry Stonehill was an American who is very similar to a lot of controversial people today that are close to the people in power. And Harry Stonehill was not ashamed of how he used that power. So he maintained several black books na nandun yung multiple ledgers that showed how much he was paying these politicians. So Jose Jokno wanted to get him because he held parang blackmail material yun. So sinugod niya yung offices ni Harry Stonehill, which are incidentally is around here, no, near the Ortigas area. And then nakuha truckloads of of documents. Pero that raid had no paperwork behind it. So Harry Stonehill sued na he didn't want that to be admitted into evidence. And you get the case of Stonehill versus Jokno, where the Supreme Court, the Philippine Supreme Court, ruled na you can't do that if you need to put in evidence. You have to be able to prove that you obtained it legally. So now that's been baked into the Constitution, and now it's part of our Constitution as the exclusionary rule and the fruit of the poisonous tree. So yeah, that's
Galing.
that's the ano.
Thank you, Attorney Kiko. May tanong ako dito, no? Si ito bang Chief Justice William Taft is the same William Howard Taft?
Yes, that's the same guy.
Became Governor General of the Philippines, ano?
Yes, that's the same guy.
Yan, yung tapos ang dumadaan ng LRT, mga kababayan.
Yes.
Oo. Pero may isa pang trivia dito din sa Pilipinas related to this. Yung decision ng Supreme Court do sa cybercrime law in relation to yung online collection. Diba?
Yes. Yep. They touched on this din na if they allow the cybercrime law as worded to stand, it will violate this rule. So tinanggal yung collection ng
Online collection.
Online collection of data without warrant.
Galing. So this quote came from that that case, di ba? So
dissenting opinion. Yeah. Talo siya. But later on, people realized that this was the right thing to do in the first place. So kung ano yung dating dissent, yun ang naging quoted opinion niya.
Na-reverse yung decision, yung original decision, na-reverse yun later. Decades later, ha?
Decades later pa, So ang tagal din ng maturity ang tagal ng maturity ng privacy practice sa US kung ganun ang case, no? So
pati dito. Matagal. The fruit of the poisonous tree wasn't adopted until Stonewall versus Joke no, the 60s, and then baked into the 73 Constitution. Tapos na-adapt ulit sa 1987. Matagal siya.
Attorney Kicks, pa-explain nga sa estudyante mo yung the fruit of the poisonous tree. Yeah.
Iba pa yun. Gusto mo so, yun kanina pa sinasabi. The fruit of the poisonous
tree.
The fruit of the poisonous tree. That just means na if you are going to get evidence as a law enforcement officer and put it in trial against someone for the commission of a crime, that evidence has to be properly obtained. If you break the law in getting your evidence, you cannot use that evidence against some person to account for any criminal liability. Unfortunately, sa Pilipinas, ang nangyayari is so the police officer catches you and then brings you to the fiscal, and doon kayo magsasagutan. According to the Constitution, the fiscal is supposed to not include in his evaluation any evidence that was illegally obtained. But what's being done in the country is that evidence is then thrown to the court, and then they let the court rule on it. Which is why, especially in this country, just because someone is brought to the court to answer for a criminal offense, hindi mo na pwedeng sabihin kaagad na, oy, guilty yan. Kasi nadala sa court. You have to wait for the conviction. Yun yung doon.
Yan. So dapat hindi poisonous yung fruit. Hindi poisonous yung tree.
Yes. Dapat, and that's biblical imagery from kasi 'di ba yung tree ni Adan at ni Eva. You cannot get from that.
Yung tree of the knowledge of good and evil, di ba? So
yes.
So kung illegally obtained yung ebidensya, it won't be accepted by the courts.
No.
Okay. Yan. Nalabas sa exam yan.
Recent cases yung sa mga rights organizations dito ngayon, ganun din. Follow that principle because it appeared na illegally obtained yung evidence against yung mga rights organization na kinasuhan. Okay. So we continue.
Continue ito. Ayan na. So the most...
Ayan.
Our
Sa
current
Bill of Rights natin, 1987 Constitution, no? These are the rights, no? So, yun nga, right against unreasonable searches and seizures, kailangan may warrant kung maghahanap ng ebidensya ang may kapangyarihan, no, yung mga law enforcers. The right to privacy of communication and correspondence, hindi ka basta-basta pwedeng bukas ng envelope o di kaya mag-wiretap. Okay? O incidentally, yung the Brandeis decision was at the advent of yung telephony at saka wiretapping. So dito naman sa atin, internet, di ba? 100 years later sa internet naman. And then of course, under the Bill of Rights, just to continue, the right against self-incrimination, liberty of abode, the right to due process, and the right to and freedom of association. So that's in the Bill of Rights. So, Attorney Cakes, you want to comment on this?
Yeah. So the right to privacy as a whole thing, no, it's not inside the right to privacy of communication and correspondence. That's just a small part of the right to privacy. The right to privacy is scattered throughout the Bill of Rights. So hindi mo pwedeng sabihin yan lang, ito lang may privacy o communication and correspondence. Yung iba, ano kinalaman sa privacy? The right to privacy is actually, it's way more than that. It's the right to be left alone. It's the right to be, if it's your business, it's your business. Walang makialam. Huwag kang makialam sa buhay ng may buhay. That is, if we always say na we don't have a Filipino right to privacy and understanding. I don't agree with that. It's we actually have it. It's just not couched in the same language. So yeah. So anong pake mo? That if we understand it that way, okay. Kasi pag nakikialam ka when it's not your place to, that's something that we as a culture now we'll get violent over that. But if we don't understand it in that way, it's not gonna sink in. So yeah, that's one aspect of right to privacy that we understand colloquially and is as such enshrined inside our Bill of Rights.
Pero sa sa Philippine culture kasi yung concept ng privacy lalo na in some indigenous areas, no? The concept of privacy medyo it's non-existent or nebulous. Right? Kasi very communal tayo Very communal ang mga Pinoy. So tingnan mo bahay, typical bahay ng Pinoy. It's just one square structure, walang division na kwarto. Okay, so everybody eats in the same place, everybody sleeps in the same place, so there's really no privacy. So kaya nga for others, it's very difficult to grasp the concept of privacy as, for example, enshrined in our Bill of Rights. Yun din naman ang challenge. Okay. So we'll slowly segue into yung data privacy, after this. So
Lito, may question na si Ernie na relevant din. So again, Ernie Imperial asked this question, Attorney Kiko, what's the impact of the Anti-Terrorist Act with those principles?
Sub judice ko, I'm a petitioner.
Oo nga, masyadong encroaching onto a lot of privacy issues yun
Yun na yan.
Sige.
Okay,
Ernie, we'll take that into episode.
Thank you.
Attorney Kings, where do we sign?
Petitioner siya.
Pending na siya sa Supreme Court. Nag-oral arguments na kami.
Nice.
So, yun.
Kasi ang laki implication nun
Pwede ba mag-file ng intervenor?
I'm not sure. Nag-present ng both sides
Okay. Sige.
Maganda pa pinagalitan pa ni Chief Justice Gesmundo yung sa Solicitor General. Na you're not prepared.
So next slide, please.
Okay.
Teka muna, may isa pa. Bago tayo libat sa slide, si Maricel may question. How is this law linked to the provision of DPA that law enforcement units can access data as needed Does it mean that there must be a court order prior to this that they can exercise said law enforcement rights?
Oh,
Thank you for that question.
Thanks,
Okay.
ma'am.
This is the Supreme Court. Supreme Court. This is the Philippine Constitution. And as such, that's the supreme law. You can't have any other law contradict that. So, from that in parang ano ba yun? Social contract, hubs is the Leviathan. Anyway, the social contract. That's the social contract. That's the Constitution. So, if no one can go above this, then what the DPA says essentially is that the DPA law enforcement agencies don't need your consent before they process your information to investigate a wrongdoing. Ano ba naman na tatanungin ng police sa criminal? Alam mo, suspect ka. Pwede bang investigate ka namin? Hindi. No crime will get solved. So, that's all that is. And therefore, when there is an intrusion into your fundamental rights, that's inside the Bill of Rights, your right against unreasonable searches and seizure, they still have to go to the court and apply for a warrant. That's why in Section 13F of the Data Privacy Act, one of the bases for the processing of sensitive personal information is the establishment, exercise, or defense of legal claims in a court of law. Kasi may judge that can issue a warrant. And the judge is supposedly trained in evaluating whether there is a clear and present danger that the state has a right to prevent, and now can then intrude on your privacy and get the information that it needs to prosecute an offense.
Yan, thank you, Attorney Kiko. Siyempre, the warrant, di ba ipaprocess yung warrant without the knowledge of the quote-unquote suspect? Siyempre.
Walang ano si suspect doon.
Walang alam.
Wala. The judge personally examines the officer and the witnesses to determine if there is probable cause.
Yan, okay. Thank you for that question, Maricel. No? Okay. So, next slide na tayo. Yan.
So, ito naman, yung, I don't know, I forget when former Chief Justice Puno delivered this speech entitled The Common Right to Privacy, no? And in it, he identified three types of privacy: locational or situational privacy, informational, and decisional privacy. No? Alam mo ba, Attorney Kicks, kung kailan yan, did this predate yung Privacy Act or not?
Yes, this is before the Data Privacy Act.
Yan.
What's happened since is that we now understand that this informational privacy, the expectations, the definition of that and how that gets interpreted, yan yung Data Privacy Act.
Yeah. So, doon tayo sa segue nga doon sa data privacy definition naman, di ba? So, next slide, Sam, please. Yan, yung informational privacy. No? The interest in avoiding disclosure of personal matters. No? Not the right not to have private information disclosed, and the right to live freely without surveillance and intrusion. Right? This is the right of the individual to control information about oneself. In other words, no? So medyo yung mga familiar sa Data Privacy Act natin, palagay ko nakikita na yung relasyon definition nito doon sa goals and objectives ng Data Privacy Act. Right? Next slide, please, Sam. So, what is data privacy? So, we'll answer that as well. No? It is the right of the individuals to have control over how their data or their personal information is collected and used. So, i-couch mo doon sa definition ng informational privacy, control is this central point. No? Control of one's personal data is the central point ng data privacy. Okay. Next slide, please. And then leads to the definitions of the data privacy principles of transparency, legitimate purpose, and proportionality. In a lot of conferences and seminars, parati ito na-stress, no? Privacy or transparency, legitimate purpose, and proportionality. And we'll go through each one of those. We'll map it with the data life cycle naman.
Dito sa show natin, palagi natin binabanggit yun.
Yes. Okay. So, ano yung goal ng transparency? No? This refers naman nga to respecting the rights of the individual whose personal information is going to be collected and used. No? So, disclose the intent of the collection, processing, and use. No? Provide appropriate privacy notices and obtain consent forms and from and respond to queries of the data subject. No? Nakita natin to yung na-discuss natin previously, data privacy rights, no? Yung consent, the necessity of obtaining the consent, and the provision of privacy notices. No? So kailangan transparent talaga siya. I failed to cite the particular advisories, no? And circulars here, pero makikita natin yan sa issuances din ng MPC. Next is legitimate purpose. Kailangan specific yung purpose for data collection and use. And processing should not go beyond that particular purpose. And of course, proportionality. You collect only as much data as can be used to meet the purpose for which you are collecting and processing data. Do not go beyond it. Right? So, dito yung tatlong prinsipyo naman. And next, please. So, we go into the data life cycle. Isa-isahin natin yan. No, it starts with collection, use and processing, retention and storage, disclosure and sharing, and transfer. No? Tapos yung disposal. Yung number 5, karaniwan, nakakalimutan yan. No?
Disposal or destruction.
Disposal or destruction.
Oo.
So, yan. So, transparency stems from the data subject's right to know. No? Okay. So, kailangan the data subject is informed of the purpose of personal data collection, use, retention, disclosure, and disposal, as well as how this how the data will go through the life cycle.
So clearly, dapat dito explain to, di ba, properly from life cycle explanation pala yung sa transparency, di ba? So,
yes.
Collecting this because, and this is how we're going to use it, and this is how we're going to retain it, di ba? It will be disclosed to the following, blah, blah, etc. And after some time, we will dispose it and destroy it, di ba? So ganun kasimple lang yung di ba? Yung transparency.
Of course. Yes. Hindi ba one of the rules nga is, for example, if you're going to share the personal information of a data subject, you have to seek consent. You have to inform him and seek consent that you're going to share. For example, no? Yung sharing and disclosure is part of the life cycle of the data. Okay?
So Lito, for example, ganito sa raffle. Oy, kukolektahin namin yung data mo kasi mananalo ka sa raffle. Hanggang doon lang yung explanation din. Sir, pagka binigyan mo sa amin yung details, mananalo ka sa raffle. So yun ang kanilang transparency.
Mananalo ka sa raffle. Sinabi, mananalo sa raffle, gano'n ka kasigurado na mananalo ako?
Di ba? Ganun pina-explain. You win.
Yan yung tinatawag na clickbait eh. May assurance na mananalo.
So, Sir Tolaj, yung mga principles, I'm sure ito yung issue, di ba? When do you state that sa mga data subjects? And meron ba silang karapatan na malaman specifically, ito lang yung kukunin mo, dito mo lang gagamitin, down to the detail na pangalan, address, phone number, ito lang mga kukunin namin?
Well, at the onset of the project, no, when you ask for data from the data subjects at the onset, sinasabi mo na yung purpose. Ini-explain mo na bawat isa. Okay, paano maapektuhan, and then of course doon sa dulo, tatanong mo, payag ho ba kayo na konektahin namin yung datos ninyo? In many cases, of course, no choice. So for example, mag-apply ka ng SSS mo, kailangan ano, di ba? Hindi ka magiging miyembro ng SSS kung hindi mo ibibigay yung personal information mo. But then, the SSS has this duty kasi nga kailangan protection na nila yung datos mo. Right?
Yes. Oh, sir ako na. Dito. Alam mo, pero wait, during the lecture, your discussion, na-formulate ko na dapat pag gumagawa ka ng privacy notice, ito lang palang susundan mo.
Oh, yes.
CRRD. Ito lang.
This is the start of it. Kasi you need to, ang privacy notice kasi, okay, sa atin kasi sanay tayo pag naglalakad tayo ng papel, tinatabihan natin ng papel, bawat firma na pinupuntahan ng papel hanggang matapos yung papel. The privacy notice is supposed to tell you kanino pupunta yung papel at what stage hanggang matapos siya, hanggang ma-process ka na. Also, it's supposed to let you know that information before you put it in. So, marami pa naman ng privacy notice. So, and there are many modes of delivery of that. Either ibibigay mo siya in a small slip that you give together with the form that you're going to give, or may poster, or may skit, may video presentation sa tabi. Maraming delivery methods yan. But what's important is kung gaano yan tumatak sa data subject. Pag tinanong mo later on yung data subject, itong field na to, mother's maiden name, bakit nandyan yan? Dapat kaya niya sagutin. Pag hindi niya kaya sagutin, you did not fulfill your obligation to adhere to the principle of transparency.
Thank you, Attorney Iso.
Yan. It's really, you have to educate your data subjects. Diba? You have to create awareness in them. Okay. Oh, next slide tayo, Sam.
Next slide.
Ito, iisahin natin naman yung stages, no? Kasi nga yung legitimate purpose and proportionality, it relates to each stage of the collection. Okay? So, typically, ito yung mga tinatanong ko, no, for each stage. When I do my PIA, no, and awareness, I ask the question, what is the purpose of data collection? Right? And then, what pieces of personal data will be collected? Do these pieces of personal data collected sufficiently meet the purpose of the collection? Okay? One has to determine what pieces of information are relevant to the purpose for which you are collecting the data. Okay, so nasa-set mo na kagad yung limits. Right? So the next stage is yung use and processing. Next slide please, Sam. Yan. No? So what is the purpose of processing or use? So to define that too. No? How will the data collected be processed or used, and what information is sought to be generated? Okay, so dinidefine yan. So if you're designing, ginagawa ito sa pag-design pa din lang ng system eh. Kaya nga, di ba, dun sa concept ng privacy by design, nasa umpisa na yan, ini-inject na rin natin yung privacy by design principles. Right? And then the next stage is, next slide. Retention and storage. Why would you want to store? Definitely, of course, if you want to store it, you want to keep it for some time. No? And how will the collected data be retained, and how long will you retain it? How long will you keep it? meron akong ginawa na privacy policy noon. Sabi ko, yung retention period is for 3 years. Kung yung 3 years na yun, titignan nyo, swak sa election life cycle din yan, 3 years. Kasi yung data na kinokolekta namin is about volunteers. Purpose for keeping that is, dinideclare naman namin, we will contact you for the next election. Okay? Sabi naman ng lawyer na nag-review ng policy ko, sabi niya, 3 years is too long. Okay? Tanong ko naman, can you give me an example of the length of time I can keep the data? Diba? So doon din papasok yung sa dulo mamaya, yung period naman. No? So the next one is data sharing or transfer. No? What is the purpose of disclosure or sharing and transfer? How will it be disclosed and shared? And what are the obligations of the third party to whom the data will be shared or disclosed? Or maybe transferred kapag halimbawa, binili na yung organization mo, binili niya yung client list. Diba? Ano yung magiging obligasyon ng third party? Kung sa akin, kung transfer yung data, do I still have the obligation to check on that data? Right? Kasi kasama sa risks yan, sa risk analysis. Right? And then finally, the last stage is...
May magandang question si Maricel na pwedeng i-relate dito. No? So, ang tanong ni Maricel, we're calling it out. Okay? What if the data subject is not directly involved in the processing of his data? For example, beneficiary yung data subject sa isang insurance coverage of a recipient or maybe a recipient or a remittance. Ang tanong niya is do we need consent for that? Tanong ni Maricel. I think anyone of us can answer this, no? So,
okay.
That's the scenario. I'll post it again.
Okay. So the data subject is a beneficiary in an insurance coverage. In that case,
or recipient para may
to process that information, you're processing that information to fulfill the contract, which is an insurance contract. And therefore, pwede yan under Section 12B of the Data Privacy Act. You don't need to get the insurance, and you don't need to get the consent anymore.
Yes.
Remember that consent is just one of the bases for processing information. It's the strongest one, but it's not the only one. The other thing is that you should remember then that at every stage of the data lifecycle, the controller does not own the data. The owner of the data is the data subject. The controller is just controlling it. So if there is anything that you're going to do with the recipient, with that data subject, for example, that's outside the contract. So, yan, insurance contract. So, babayaran mo siya. So, you need to process that information. Pero kung ikaw gagamitin mo yung list of beneficiaries na walang, sila mismo wala silang insurance contract as marketing leads, yun bawal yun. And there you have to get their consent to further process their information for that other purpose.
Yan.
Kasi the contract is with the one who bought the insurance policy, di ba?
Yeah.
Sakto. It's also to the benefit of the beneficiaries, di ba? Paano kayo makakontakt ng insurance company kung wala kayong contact details ng policy? So,
correct.
So that's the main purpose.
Yeah. Kung yung beneficiary naman, bibentahan mo rin ng insurance, yun yung bawal.
Correct.
Yeah.
Dapat po consent nyo. Siguro,
tanong mo.
probably, dati,
nakilala mo na yung beneficiary at inalok mo.
Oo. At tinanong mo dahil beneficiary siya.
Pero kung gagamitin mo yung information ng beneficiary para mag-SMS blast ka or spam, ayan.
Bawal yun.
Hindi nyo na maalam eh.
Database namin Thank you for that question, Maricel. So
Ang
nakikita nyo din na,
ang karaniwang inaano diyan, di ba namin pwedeng i-gamitin para inform them about our other products and services? Code ng marketing yan.
Yes.
Hindi pwede yun. Yan. Okay, punta na tayo sa disposal and destruction.
Yan, ako maganda.
Again, you have to define the purpose. No? If, or you ask the question, has the purpose of collection and use been met? Tapos na.
Tapos na. Nagamit na. Okay.
Or, and then yung proportionality, how will the personal data collected be disposed of? How will it be destroyed? Yan. Kailangan sabihan din yung data subject na, uy, tapos na yung purpose ng collection and use. Ito, we will dispose it in this manner. Right? Yan. Okay.
Anong best practices dito? Doon dito? Sa disposal and destruction? Sa physical, I mean, you can see it You can shred and then...
Diba? Kung physical, disshred mo yung forms.
Oo.
Diba?
Kung going scratch, no? Diba?
Pero wag naman anti-environment na susunugin mo. Right? Kung electronic, there are, kasi dati, prevalent, na-introduce na yung electronic storage. So, medyo mas mahirap magbura. No? There are other, doon sa magnetic storage kasi meron tayong mga degaussing, di ba? Expose mo lang sa magnet, okay na yan, yung mga ganun. Di ba? But of course, there are also... Oh, yes, Abe.
Go ahead, Sir Lito.
Go ahead. Ikaw yung ano.
Sasabihin ko lang sana na depende sa industry, merong mga standards din for data disposal. No? Kung gaano ka-critical yung information, kung saan ginamit, may mga different levels. No? Actually, kahit nga sa how do you call that? Sa measurement ng pino ng pag-dispose ng document, meron nun. Tapos, kung electronic naman, merong tinatawag na number of passes na kailangan mong gawin na minimum para masabi mong nabura mo. It's not really a trivia. When you erase kasi a magnetic media, wala naman talagang such thing as erasing, no? Hindi naman talaga binubura. What is actually done is either you remove the directory that refers kung nasaan yung data dun sa media, or patungan mo ng random data. So yung number ng patong ng random data, yun ang tinatawag na pass. So obviously, pag military standard, there are so many number of passes, kaya medyo matagal yung pag-erase ng data for optical media. So I just want to highlight, there are certain standards as well that you can look up kung ano yung pinaka-safest and obviously pinaka-matagal or pinaka-mahal, and there are also the acceptable ones, no, na pwede mong gamitin for your everyday use, so to speak. Yun lang po.
Yeah, question, sir. Di ba sa privacy notice, sinasabi natin para saan at hanggang kailan. So pag nagsabi ka na ng disposal mo, halimbawa, after 5 years, how will you inform them na dispose mo na siya?
Dapat na sa privacy notice yun. You can say that this data is going to be securely destroyed in whatever form it has. No, you don't say what form kasi that in itself is a security risk. So sasabihin mo lang na you're going to destroy it. And then if they need more information, contact the DPO.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ganon. Pero at least nasabi mo na masisira na siya.
Exercise mo yung right mo.
Okay. So tiwala and exercise your right.
Yeah. Trust but verify. Pwede.
You can ask for confirmation that isa sa mga update natin mamaya yung data subject access request. Isa to sa mga pwede mong tanungin sa mga sa mga PIP.
Yes.
And pag sinabi nila, na-destroy na namin yan, and apparently hindi pa pala. So
yan. Issue yan.
Yan.
Actually, yun din tayo kulang,
May tanong ako, Attorney
That-
Kiko. Oh, you're familiar,
Yes.
di ba? Meron tayong optical media board, di ba? So,
Yes.
ano yung pwede nilang maging role dito in partnership with NPC, of course? Dahil, di ba, I mean, because of the shift to the digital, I'm sure ang dami mga storage of di ba, devices that are floating around, di ba? From enterprise to consumer. Oh.
Actually, the optical media board is that's only for films and other motion pictures that are distributed that way.
Oh, mga DVD saka Blu-ray.
DVDs, oo.
Tony
Exactly.
Kicks, hindi ba panghuli sa mga illegal na nagbebenta ng laptop?
Parang
Kasi
ganun.
na yun.
But that's
Naisip
not,
ko lang, optical media kasi, di ba? So, I'm not sure kung sinama na nila yung mga storage devices with that. But,
no, that's not within their scope.
Yun. So, mostly
kaya nga nahirapan before sa CD burners. Kasi may legitimate purpose siya so you can't just confiscate CD burners. So, ginagawa nila, hinahabol na yung mga mass production na CD. But other than that, wala. And as a storage device, wala na rin siya.
Talagang dying format na
yung
So I will put Attorney Kicks on the spot. So do you think they've outlasted their relevance?
I think they should change. I think the charter needs revision to cover streaming and but even then I don't think that they have the same they should have the same reach and power that they had before. That's just me.
Thank you.
Sundot lang ako sa legitimate purpose. Kasi you can define legitimate purpose as for the purpose for the data for the entire process. And you can define legitimate purpose for the piece of physical information that you have. Kadalasan kasi at our data life cycles are mostly paper in this country, but sometimes you have partial digitization and partial transformation. So at some point, yung papel nagiging digital. So the problem is after, like for example, sa hospital, they'll ask you to submit all these forms. And then pagkatapos, para ma-enter nila sa system nila, pagkatapos you don't know what happens to the form. Ang nangyayari, most of the time, with other, say, government agencies, they do the same thing, di ba? So, chinachap nila yung paper with your Xerox ID or something. Chinachap nila, ginagawa nilang notepad. So, kasama sa nilalagay sa notepad, ang lagay po namin is 1,000 pesos. For example, not saying that this is happening to every government agency.
Save the trees. Attorney Kick, save the trees. Sayang, scratch yun eh.
So, scratch. Pero not understanding yung nasa likod doon, pwede pa rin makita. So, when I was still inside the office, nag-issue kami, may natanggap kaming breach notification kasi may nagreklamong data subject na nakatanggap siya ng scratch paper na may ID sa likod. So, when you have to look at if the purpose of collection and use has been met, then that also has to get destroyed. So if you're the DPO, you always have to look at those things also. Hindi lang at the end of the life cycle ka titingin ng destruction.
Correct.
May question ako sa disposal, Yung anonymization and if you redact information, is that considered also as disposal?
Hindi. Okay, so I asked several people inside. So I won't name names, but as of the moment, the understanding is any aggregation of data is outside this coverage of the Data Privacy Act. Kasi you're already aggregating it. So pag nirelease mo na yung data na yon as aggregate numbers, di ba? Ang hirap nang mag-extract ng info dun eh. Mag-reverse engineering ka from that info. So, wala na yun. It's outside the data lifecycle. of personal information. It's in the data lifecycle of another process, but it's not personal data.
So magbabago yung data class niya, Attorney Kicks, no? That happens. May isa pa akong tanong dito. So, in the event nga, for example, if you have completely deleted everything or destroyed everything, but nagkaroon ka ng instance, pwede ko magkaroon ng parang data resurrection or data revitalization strategy. Yung nga lang. For example, oops, very strict ka. Di ba? You had a very efficient data life cycle. Sabi, okay. At the end of that, for example, 1 year na talaga for this project. But it so happened pala after that na you have this completely destroyed it, kailangan pala yung data mo yan. So, should we put something like that in place? Parang fail-safe? Or is that a risk? Or is that a violation again of your privacy policy?
It depends. Kailangan niyo ba? If it's absolutely necessary, baka, and it's not sensitive personal information, baka pasok pa yan sa Section 12F, legitimate purposes of the personal information controller. So, case to case, you cannot say na ano siya, but you have to plan for it. If that's something that you do, and that capability is available to you, then you should plan for it. Capacity is intent. So, if you do have that intent, there should be a process. There should be a privacy impact assessment. There should be controls.
Correct. So some actually the right term hindi siya data resurrection but actually archiving. So dapat when in your process or your project or whatever purpose it is, i-state mo, we'd like to, for example, alumni ka ng eskwelahan, no? We would be archiving this record of your data just in case hingan mo ko ng, I don't know, transcript of records or whatever, but it will be stored here, protected by this. And the only way we will get it is if, you can get consent or it's you that's asking it. So, tama si Attorney Kicks, you have to plan in advance what are the data types that needs to be archived. Kung wala namang reason to archive it or keep it for a long time, then, ultimately, diretso, data destruction siya kagad.
Tama.
Yeah, Attorney Kicks. Question.
Sige, go ahead, Arn.
Paano dito yung no harm, no foul principle dito sa data privacy? Halimbawa, may ID, nakita mo yung ID, no harm. Wala namang, so what kung nakita mo yung ID? Yung kanina, dun sa paper, no harm, no foul.
There's no such thing. The moment you violate the data privacy right, that already is a cause of action, pwede ka nang kasuhan. Pwede ka nang bigyan ng danyos perjuicios. So there's no harm, no foul. The moment someone who doesn't have a right to access your data has access to your data, tapos. So you have to really make sure na that situation doesn't happen. And when it does happen, because it will happen, you have enough procedures in place to ensure na may damage control ka. Kung wala talaga yun, kulong ka. There's no between.
Attorney Kicks kasi medyo prevalent kasi dito sa atin, no? Na, nakita ko nga yung ID. Wala naman nagreklamo eh. Di wala. So ayun, alam mo yun, yung isip natin na since wala nagreklamo, no harm, no foul. So okay lang. Ganon.
Yeah. Walang sikreto na hindi na nabubunyag. Right? It's people talk and the walls have ears.
Yan.
So it's not...
Sam, narinig mo yun, ha?
Ha?
Typically yung situation na yan. Yung situation na yan, actually, sa mga logbooks ng sa mga building lobbies, halimbawa. Diba?
Actually, napakagandang point nun, Sir Lito. Ang pinakamaraming leak, actually, yung manual portion. Kasi yun yung pinakamadaling kunin eh.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So, depending on the size of that leak, that can be a data breach. Kung nasita ka, because of the severity of that breach, di ba? Lalo na pag naisip ng tao, ay, pwede palang kumita dito. That's going to be a very powerful motivator.
Oo, lalo na yun.
Pages niya, di ba? Daming pages ng
Malapit
log.
na ang eleksyon, nilalagay mo doon pangalan mo tsaka address mo.
Saka abet, isa, tumit ko kanina, dingding lang ang pagitan. Di ba? So, yan, concept here. So, may tanong tayo dito from MS. Ang ganda nitong tanong niya. Okay? So, specific, good evening, question for BIR retention period na 10 years. Covered ba yan ang data na nasa ERP database? And dapat na strictly i-follow yun. So, 10-year data retention period.
Ano yung ERP?
From BIR.
Electronic receipt?
Enterprise
resource.
Big
Go ahead, ma'am.
Hindi. Yung nasa 10-year period ng nasa BIR, yun yung resibo mo eh. Anything that you need to, the receipt.
Accounting records.
Yeah, accounting records.
Pero
tax filings.
Oo. Anything you need to prepare to reconstruct the tax filing, kasama yun. But if it's your customer database or anything else related to it, any metadata from it, any, hindi, outside yun. So, I'm not sure.
Pero actually, yung 10-year period can be extended indefinitely. Pag na-issuehan ka na ng BIR ng letter of authority, yan, hanggat hindi natatapos yung investigasyon at yung audit, you have to keep the data.
Yes. The rule of thumb is, why are you keeping the data? Dapat may masagot ka. Pag sinabi mong, ewan, baka kailangan natin at some point, delete mo na yun. Pero dapat masabi mo kasi kailangan ng BIR. Kasi kailangan nitong agency na to. Kasi kailangan ng tool, kailangan ng whatever. Regulated company ka, kailangan ng
But, same thing goes kung gaano mo katagal tatago. Dapat pa-explain mo rin bakit, di ba?
Oo.
Exactly.
Katulad, SSS records, halimbawa. Di ba? An employee has long terminated his employee with a certain employer. Tapos kukuha siya ng benefits sa SSS. Di ba? Yung pala, there's something amiss with his records. Kailangan balikan yung employer. Yung mga ganun bang issue. Sa mga compliance issues din yan sa ibang regulations.
Yung retention period talaga dapat, again, case to case, So, yung maganda nga minap ni Lito sa transparency, legit represent proportionality. So it will be different for each company. If you're in this industry that has, for example, standards in place, yun, iba-iba talaga. Sa medical care, iba rin, Sa schools, iba rin. Kasi CHED also has policies, for example, maybe iba rin yung policy rin for document retention. So, ito may magandang tanong, I guess, si Maricel, ito naman sa corporate setting, will a data sharing agreement be a reference for a group of companies to legally permit them to interchangeably use or process personal data for any purpose? Nako, sarap sagutin ito. Conglomerates.
Attorney Kicks is shaking his head.
Please refer to circular number 2020-03. You can, if you have a group of companies, you can either make a large DSA, tapos annex ka na lang. But every time you share a set of information inside the conglomerate, you always have to be able to define the purpose. Hindi ka pwede mag-share ng blanket purpose. For whatever purpose they have, di pwede yun. Because yun yung legitimate purpose principle. Yes. Now, the purpose that you have for processing the information dictates how you're going to treat the data. So, if it's for employment, siguraduhin mo that the data that's going to be shared is only for employment. For evaluation, ganon, inside the conglomerate. Up and down. Pwede yun, but you have to specify. And it has to be inside your privacy notice. And it has to be inside any consent mechanism.
Mhm.
The existence of the data sharing agreement is separate from the purpose for which you do it. The purpose determines your legitimacy. Is the purpose within the legitimate purposes of the corporation, of the conglomerate? That's in section 12F, which in that case is absolutely necessary for the operation of the corporation. Kung hindi, then outside siya, then that's not ano. What is an example of something that needs a data sharing agreement? If you have if you're dealing with suppliers and you want a centralized supply chain hub, then you either you need to set up a data sharing agreement, and or depending on how you're going to structure it, you can structure it as outsourcing to the mother company. In which case, the mother company becomes the processor for everything, and that outsourcing agreement is then your data sharing agreement. And they use that term loosely. Isang pet peeve yan. So may outsourcing agreement, tapos may outsourcing agreement kasi yun nandun yung data privacy terms. Hindi, nasa isang kontrata lang yan. So yan.
Sa Attorney Kicks, I like the na meron talagang, there's a mother of all DSAs for conglomerates, di ba? But yung mga annex, for example, yung conglomerates nyo, like several of you have complementary solutions or products, for example, that you'd like to offer to a common customer. That one will require a DSA annex because that won't be covered by that specific So mga ganung instances, maganda yung dynamics actually ng conglomerates if you look at it. And we understand na there's this di ba? Temptation to get from the poisonous tree to share databases.
Ganito na lang. If you're the DPO of a conglomerate, always be ready na whatever subsidiary you have will be sold at any time.
Okay.
So that's how you treat your data. Assume na iba yung may-ari. That way, pag nabenta yan, hindi ka problema. Planchado ka na. Remember, conglomerates create subsidiaries because it's more efficient for them to isolate liability and it's separate from their core business. And because that subsidiary is separate from the core business, you can get dumped at any time.
Pero good question. Yan, so ako din kung data subject ako, and if we have, for example, 12 companies in that conglomerate, each of them I have to give my consent to for them to process my data. So 12 consent yun. Or so just imagine that. Yeah. Okay, thank you for that question. Maricel, dito meron pa ba susunod dito sa disposal?
I think this is the last slide.
Again, thank you very much. Back-to-back speaker.
Ang pogi.
Pogi.
Kontakin niyo po si Don Vito. Ba't Angel ang ginagamit mo dito?
That's my legal name.
Hindi ba Angelito? Kaya
No.
So, Angel talaga.
Kasi junior, kaya mini Angel Angelito.
Correct.
Si Miho.
Okay. Ano nga tayo? Balik tayo sa mga nag-greet sa atin. Meron tayong mga na-miss. Thank you for the teaching. So, yun po ang isang format na introduce sa ating team teaching ang tawag, di ba? Si Arnie Barcelo. So, kaya team learning tayo. Natututo tayo sa
before we kasi earlier si Arnie was suggesting we inject ethics dito sa na to, I'll put that in kasi yung ethics guidance, di ba, sa collection, di ba? Yung sinasabi nga natin, proportionality, but somebody collects more. Ang question dyan in terms of ethics is, ang guidance is, would you do to others what you wouldn't want done to you. Basically, yun yung guiding principle ng ethics, no? Or do unto others as you would do, as others would do unto you. Yung ganun. So, in each of those stages din, tanong natin, same question, right? Pagdating doon sa processing, will I process the data beyond the declared process? Di ba? When I inform the data subject na dito ko gagamitin. Tapos nakita ko, uy, may pwede pang paggamitan. Tatanungin mo yung sarili mo ngayon. Di ba? Using that guiding principle of ethics.
Thank you po, Father Lito.
Extensively in data ethics in future episodes.
Correct. Tama.
It deserves it.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, yung kanina kasi dinidiscuss natin. Gusto ko kasing i-reform yung how we deliver database concepts sa school. Kasi standard kasi yun parang yun na yung foundation. Pero I think now that we have this kind of practice, kailangan medyo ibahin yun na sabi nyo nga, tinatanong ko kayo, saan sa data lifecycle papasok ang ethics? Saan papasok yung data privacy? Kasi data lifecycle is different. Maybe the way we teach it sa database or yung database practices, wala siyang data privacy dun We just teach it like, collect mo to, ito yung from the business rules, from the business practices, gagawan mo siya ng relationship, de-design mo siya, iproprogram mo na. So, that's the usual way we teach data lifecycle. Yun. So sabi ko baka merong way para ma-educate din na dapat sa umpisa pa lang you think of data privacy na, no? Yun. So sabi nyo nga lahat doon sa cycle na yun dapat nag-start ng data privacy. And kanina din narinig ko kay Attorney Kiko, hindi pala pwede dito yung naninigurado ka or nanglalamang ka, no? Na baka in the future magamit ko siya. Which is a good strategy in business, diba? Pero dito, hindi pwede.
Yes, Arnie, what you described can also be addressed by privacy by design, or privacy and security by design. So, nandun din yun sa principles na yun So, and you're correct. Similarly, I think the ethics is across all sa data life cycle.
Yeah.
Nandun siya palagi. It's always So,
and yun ang pinakamahirap ituro kasi
yes.
Hindi
siya madali.
Bata ka pa lang dapat tinuturo na yan. And ang ginagawa
Pero ganun din sa kasi, yun nga, sinabi ni Abet din kanina, yung data life cycle, hindi lang naman din yan sa privacy, yung sa data privacy, pero yan yung sa traditional practice natin sa industry of putting together data, you collect, you process, you share, yung mga ganun, hanggang sa disposal nga. But typically nga, doon sa practice nga sa industry, hindi nga ina-address yung disposal of destruction. Okay? But now we have the data privacy, then we have to address disposal at some point, right? And doon mga papasok din yung And then yung nag-ano na ako, baka mabigyan din ako ng tulang ganun din sa security practice. So yung sa security practice naman, when you employ security by design, you do it at the very beginning. No? At the very beginning of the project, when you conceptualize the project, when you do your analysis, you inject already security.
Yan.
First question is, how will I secure?
Yan yung hinihintay ko sabihin ni Sir Lito Doon sa ilalim ng life cycle, nandun yung ethics at saka nandun yung information security. Bawat stage yung life cycle, you must be able to protect the information na nandun.
And it's not you don't take shortcuts. Doon papasok yung ethics tsaka integrity.
Correct.
So for example, may nagmamanage ng database dati. Meron akong isang kilala. Tinanong, ba't natin kailangan i-salt yung encryption ng password? Ba't pa natin kailangan i-encrypt yung password nito? Hindi naman tayo bangko. Doon yung integrity tsaka ethics pumapasok.
Tama. May propensity kasi tayo na lagi natin gustong gawin yung madali di ba? Kaya yun.
Oh, yes.
I-encrypt ko pa yan. Matatagalan yan, di ba? Depende pa kung ano level of encryption ginamit mo. Hayaan mo na, hindi naman tayo bangko Siguro, ganun yung dialogue.
Yun mismo yung dialogue. Exactly. Mismo.
Pero maganda na
hindi mo matuturo
may life cycle sa data life cycle talaga sa privacy practitioners and security practitioners. So maganda siyang guide. So birth to death, diba? Yung sabi ni Abet, dalawa lang yung
para daw mas maganda, cradle to grave. Yan.
Wag na yung dagdagan palapit na tayo dun sa anyway, ito, shoutout lang again. Nakalimutan natin silang kanina kasi nga nag-start na. Yan si John Texon, magandang gabi po. Yan, good evening. Sir John, Thank you for tuning in. Yan. Ito si Sir Benjamin, dito na naman, magandang gabi. Yan, hopefully nakikita na yung issue na na-raise mo, 2 or 3 shows ago, Sir Benjamin, good luck to you resolving that issue. At meron tayong hindi nagbigay na consent kay StreamYard, si ma'am or sir na Facebook user. Ayan, kinokomentan yung ilaw ko sa likod, Pasko na raw sa bahay ko. Ganun po talaga, para po lumigay naman ang ating paligid kayo.
hindi po Pasko yan, mali po kayo. Ika nga ni partner Arnie kanina, yan? Disco lights. yung disco ball ikakabit ko na Abet para matuwa. Okay, teka, meron pa pala dito sa Google. Ay, okay, wala na. Pwede na tayo sa updates, no?
Sige. Ang ganda ng
shout out kay Pat Alinea, or Head of Secretary to NADPOP, nasa backstage po siya, kasama namin dito sa studio. Good evening, Kat.
Thank you, Kat.
Oo.
Thank you.
Add natin sa stream ulit. Yan, ito na yung updates natin. Medyo madami-dami yung updates natin ngayon, mga ka-BounceBack at ka-NADPOP. Again, shout out din kay Jason De La Rosa, who's also tuned in tonight. Ito sa NPC, ito yung kanilang loan post this week. Yan, Google takes down apps on orders of NPC. So sumunod po si Google, Google Play ito di ba? Doon nakalagay yung mga applications And then follow through po to nung ating coverage last week or 2 weeks ago na the NCPC has ordered the following, yung One Hand, PesoPop, CashCheap, and Lemon Loan. Mga 4 online lending apps na wala na siya. So again, comments, positive to, So,
yeah, paano sa ibang platforms? Kung nandun yung mga apps.
Yung isang app store daw, yung isang app store.
Ay, isa.
Sa pangalan pala, lemon loan, di ba? Lemon loan. Wala ka ba sa lemon loan?
Then again, di ba, yung clamor release for these loan shaming apps to be persecuted, Hindi pa naman tatapos tourniquet, di ba? This is part of
Hindi pa. Start pa lang yan ng laban for them.
Yung mga naiinit po dyan, like si Arnel Selly, shout out yung mga post niya palagi. Like, kung na yan.
Kailangan may sampulan kasi. So makikita natin mamaya doon sa isang update mo.
Pero initial win to, this is a good win. At least you stop the proliferation.
Tama.
Pero siguro dapat tingnan din yung ibang
Marami yan, di ba?
Yeah, actually marami ang tinitingnan nila. Shout out sa aking mga former colleagues at the Complaints and Investigations Division. Silang humahawak yan ngayon.
Pero tingnan niyo tingnan niyo yung download niya, 2.1 million collectively of these apps were downloaded.
Kasi they serve a particular market. Those are subprime loans.
Correct. And these are very desperate times. So, you know.
Yes.
Definitely, oh. And correspondingly nga, maganda rin kay NPC, meron silang enforcement, meron din silang continuing education. Ito, we're reposting this from last episode, pinakita na to. But again, September 13, if you're an OLA, if you're an online lending app owner, or if you plan to set up one, please attend this online conference, no? On September 13 from 9 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. It's a DPA seminar for lending entities. So, attendan niyo po yan para makita niyo po talaga kung paano ang tamang paraan o tamang gawi para maprotektahan ninyo ang data na kinokolekta niyo sa mga potential customers, no? Will avail of
Saka sana po kasama yung ethics, di ba, Ma'am Arnie? Lending app. Ethics po, ethics.
Oo. Talaga tinututukan na NPC to, no? Tingnan mo. May circular 20-01 nga, di ba? That focus on personal loan information, no? Kasi naman po talaga kawawa naman yung mga nalo-launch yung shame on online, di ba? For 3,000 pesos, i-broadcast yung mo sa buong contact list mo. Di ba? Ganun yung mga nangyari dati talaga. Ay, nako, di ba? Pero again, September 13, So, attend tayo. One of us kung sinong gustong, on-site reporting, on-site reporting.
Nandito po kami ngayon sa symposium ng online lending apps and entities.
Yun, sakto yan. Pwede. 10 days from now, okay? Dito na tayo sa ating, parang sa sister set ni Yantik. Ito muna from Jess Pasis, no. So iboto po natin si FFA na nominate sila sa Good Idea Award in the privacy category,
Yes.
So ibotahan po natin yung casting for votes from August 26 to September 30. Bakit si NADPOP hindi na nominate?
Ang magigitig na mga tao po sa FMA, yon si JR, sino po ba? Si Attorney Patdo, di ba? They're the director ba or board of trustees?
Oh, yes. Saka napakasipag nila post sa Privacy PH. I-post din naman sa NADPOP Video Central para naman. But then again,
Tolite, si JR Contreras, tsaka si Bombin Cadiz.
Bombin Cadiz. They're part of the board.
For media alternatives. Si Attorney Kiko, wala? Ano pala? Di ba, FMA din sa Attorney Kiko? We can ask him later. Again, ito naman, so...
Philippine Internet Freedom Alliance, si Attorney Kicks.
Similar din. Ito, Ireland's Data Privacy Watchdog finds WhatsApp a record 266 million over how it produces our data itself. So, ito po, so Ireland is part of Europe. Di ba? Tama?
Yes.
So, ulitin mo nga Irish accent.
Hirap pa. Kailangan ko ng Scotch. Parang malt. Di ba? Di ba? Aussie pala yun. So, nakikita niyo po, worldwide, data privacy is being enforced by nations. Ito po yung message dito. And that, even though, yung WhatsApp, where is it based, Abet? Saan ba naka-base yung WhatsApp? That's China.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
China ba or is it Facebook
Not sure. US or China.
Pareho kasing green.
Kaya nga eh.
Yung WeChat saka WhatsApp. Anyway, so yung message nandito is that, again, governments are strengthening their privacy laws.
Yun nga yung sinasabi kong dapat dito may masampulan eh. Diba?
Ito business example to eh. So, yeah. Wow. Okay. Next update. Thank you nga pala sino nag-post. Ali Flores. Maraming salamat for Privacy PH. Ito, maganda itong pag-usapan.
Ayan, DSAR.
So again, DSAR means Data Subject Access Rights. So sabi po ni John B. Ito yan. He filed a DSAR with one of the biggest banks in the country. Siyempre, hindi pinangalanan. Ito na lang. And we still have not received a response or acknowledgement after 30 working days. Okay? It seems that this publicly listed bank is not taking its obligations seriously. I hope that this is only an exception in the banking industry. I hope that the NPC circular and fines is released soon para tapos na ang pabebe ng mga data controllers. So, thanks admin. Ito pag-usapan natin ito ng medyo at length, no? So, again, pinakamalaking bank or one of the biggest banks ka. So, you have the resources, diba, to respond to data subject requests like this, diba? And if you look at the discussions underneath, si Attorney Jam, sinabi nga niya, they did the same thing with the telco. Yeah, and yet ganun din, matagal din yung response, no? Hindi siya instantaneous or not within, for example, a service level agreement with a customer, between a customer and a client. Di ba? So, I don't think the bank will, kung di ba, one of the biggest depositors na nag-request, definitely sasagutin nila yan, di ba? So, alam niyo naman how things are structured, di ba? Yung mga high net worth individuals, for example, nasa top tier yan. May mga personal account managers yan, kaya sumasagot. But since
Correct. Kaya dapat po si Sam ang pagtanungin nyo, panghingan nyo. Yan. Siguradong hindi kayo iisnabi ng mga bangko pag si Sam ang dapat.
Yeah. Lito, Abet, Arnie, Bizarre. Okay? Your comment on ni John D. Bello. I think si Jay Gomez also asked for a Bizarre, di ba, na to delete his data sa LGU kasi nga hindi siya na-vaccinate, di ba? So that is another example of a data sharing. Well, that's a deletion naman, di ba? Data deletion. So, and ito, litmus test to eh. Meaning for a company, ito po, isa to sa mga indicators talaga that you're taking data privacy and protection seriously. Yung time to respond to, data subject request like this.
Kasama yan doon sa parang kasama yan doon sa information dapat na nasasabihan ang data subject that if you file, for example, for a data access request, right? Time period to respond, right? Which is basically nga yung SLA naman natin sa service agreements, di ba? Tapos kung hindi ma-actionine, ano yung escalation? Where do I go? So I have to know where I go, where I should go, di ba? So kasama rin yan, kasama din to, part and parcel, yung pag-respect for the data subject's rights. So those are the indicators of a company complying with the Data Privacy Act. So if you do not respond to the DSAR, then that's an indicator that you're not complying or you're not practicing.
And comment ni John P, it's 30 working days, so that means 1.5 months. Hindi lang siya 1.5 months has passed already. So
sa government defined yan under the administrative code.
Yes.
You have to respond within 15 days.
Under the binirelease na circular yung or advisory yung NPC on data subject rights. Dapat 30 days out na yan yung data. Kaya na sinabi ng 30 working days.
Yes.
So, hindi siya 30 working days, Lord Kicks, no? 30 days siya. Dun sa
30 days. Hindi siya 30 working days. So, ibig sabihin 20 days lang siya dapat.
Calendar days.
20 working days, yes. 30 calendar days. Sobra-sobra yan.
Ako indicator to na inside the bank. Kasi kung DPO ka lang, you'll have a hard time to respond to this. Diba? In the first place, for example, baka yung pinadala na email, etc. Wala talagang process to respond. And you will need the cooperation of other business units if you're the DPO for you to be able to respond properly to this. So kung meron kayo, for example, na customer care center, I think DPO should partner with that customer care center. Kasi this is a customer issue So baka ngayon may silo, di ba? Nakahiwalay pa yung customer care center and then yung DPO may sariling silo siya. Maybe it's just a DPO received this. Ang dami niya nakukuha pala na request. Paano niya talaga actionan yun? Kasi wala silang automated system to respond to this. No? So, again, maraming dynamics po. No? Pero again, biggest banks in the country and then doon nga, if you look at the discussion, sinabi Attorney Jam, they tested it on the telco and same response din. Time, matagal din bago na-respond.
So, pero isa din yung sa titignan mo sa isang risk mo rin yan, no? If you have to study your processes din, yung response times mo, titignan mo rin yan. So if you don't have a central system na pwedeng i-disseminate yung request na yan, then you just have to find a way. Right? You have to redefine your process of response.
Correct. So ito si John B hits the nail on the head, no? Yung kanyang the third sentence, I also hope the NPC circular and fine is released soon para matapos na ang pabebe ng mga data controllers. They're dragging their foot, di ba? Or paying lip service to the law. So, again, siguro baka may pandemic din, but di ba, yung benefit of the doubt, but yeah, 30 working days.
Pwede na yan pwede na yan dalhin sa sa NPC. For, you don't have to wait for the fine. Dalhin mo na siya. Because that in and of itself, meron na siyang, may danyos na yun.
May violation na siya.
Yes.
Ayan, Sir John B. Na.
Ethics pa rin yan eh. Magkaroon naman kayo ng ethics na sumagot.
But kasi nga hindi ka high net worth individual ng bangko kaya di ba matagal ka nila sagutin. Kaya ganoon lang. So they offer
palagi akong below average daily balance eh.
Hindi kasi super high net worth si Abet. Iniisip pa lang ginagawa na nila. So, ganun sila kabilis. So, again, thank you for posting this Sir John B, and again, talaga litmus test to. It's actually a very good indicator on the commitment, di ba, of an institution in protecting and upholding the privacy rights of their customers. So yeah, thank you very much for this. Ganda ng post na to, actually maraming comment, di ba? So yeah. Ito naman tayo
parang FOI lang no? Parang FOI, Attorney K.
Ay nako.
Totoo. You know what? It's a wake up call, and it's a for us DPOs na if you have make sure binabantayan nyo yung DPO email nyo. Merong and then you have to make sure that the forms are available for your users, for your data subjects to download and use and give back to you. Na you're there to cut the bureaucracy.
Marami naman po automated tools na available na.
Dami.
Identity management. And so, konting investment lang po. So, you can do that.
Pero wag niyo naman sobrahan. Yung iba sinosobrahan para lalong ma-delay.
Ayun talaga. Uy, magandang gabi po. Yan, Dean Ces Mercado. Good evening po.
Hi,
yan,
Dean.
happy Friday, and then happy weekend na rin. Okay, and meron tayong user, again, kung sino man po kayo magandang gabi. Okay? Bigyan niyo po ng consent si StreamYard.
Facebook user.
Okay.
Tama pala.
Madami pang updates dun sa Privacy PH, So, but we picked the most commented ones. Punta naman tayo sa Cybersecurity Bureau. Yes, Abet.
Sorry, biglang pumasok sa isip ko. Kanina kasi yung sa WhatsApp, binili nga pala ng Facebook yung WhatsApp. Kaya actually, pag kinabit mo yung chat sa Facebook, tatanungin niya, you should apply for WhatsApp Business. So, I think data sharing is within the other part of Facebook na kinukuha nila sa WhatsApp. Yung conglomerate data sharing mo kanina.
Yun. Yung pala yun. Thank you for that caption.
Nabili nga pala ng Facebook yan. Di nasa Ireland.
Tama.
Correct. Mukhang Irish-based nga itong di ba? WhatsApp initially. Thank you for that catch, Abet. Salamat. Okay.
Sure.
Punta tayo sa Cybersecurity Bureau. Meron silang magandang update din. Ito, Unified Cybersecurity Standards Forum happening also on September 13. Ang dami nangyayari na September 13. Di ba? 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Okay, mukhang mapupuno tayo ng araw na yun. So, on-site reporting din. Sino kaya gusto mag-cover nito? Okay, forum objectives. Adoption of Unified Cybersecurity Standards in the Philippines. Okay? Number 1.
Kailangan matinan ko yan.
To determine compliance and certification. Yun ang number 2 goal ng forum. Number 3, establish guidelines on conducting benchmarking of ICT equipment compliant with international and local standards. Okay? If you want to inquire about it, contact Ms. Dayan P. Faustino, at dayan.pofsino@dict.gov.ph. Okay?
Sam, hindi ko mabasa eh. The cybersecurity standards for devices?
Yung number 3, establish guidelines on conducting benchmarking of ICT equipment compliant with the international local standards. So yan, devices din kasama sa equipment. Maganda tong forum na to. Kailangan i-cover natin to. So sakto, September 3, it's a Monday, no? Sorry, 13, that's a Monday.
So more of a physical product standard, Sam. Hindi yung mga security standards, ISMS, gano'n, hindi gano'n.
Hindi. Mukhang comprehensive siya, Abet. Kasi the first one nga, yung Unified Cybersecurity Standards in the Philippines. So the first one's about cybersecurity standards. Yung second one, a common criteria approach to determine compliance and certification. It can be individual and institutional certification, di ba?
Correct.
So kasi pangatlo yung sa equipment. So very comprehensive. Kaya yan. Tapos, yan. They're inviting dito sa post, Bureau of Philippine Standards, yan, BBPH tama. NTC was invited, IECP, Philippine Chamber, PCTO, and Telco sector, and other industry partners. Yeah. So, sulatan natin si Ma'am Dayan ng DICT para attend tayo dyan. Okay? See also yung mga ka-BounceBack and NADPOP in the PH-CERT, no? Dito na tayo sa ating home turf. Ito, meron palang phone si Chairman Mon. Diba? So, sino nakabasa sa inyo? Privacy by design for developers. So, if you're a solutions developer or an ISV, maganda na basahin yung column ni Chairman Mon. Diba?
Isa lang po masasabi ko. Good evening, Chairman Mon. Okay.
Magandang gabi, Chairman. Happy Friday.
Hindi, lang siya, he wants to emphasize lang na when you develop apps and when you do product development, you should have privacy by design. The rest, ikaw na bahala maghanap.
Yes.
On your own. Matanda ka na.
So Tony, do not make privacy an afterthought. Yeah. Okay.
Yan. Basta it's not an afterthought. Yan.
Okay. Again, thank you, Data Protection PH for posting this, no? This column ni Chairman. Nasa Tribune siya, So, follow nga natin yan para ma-alert tayo ng kanyang
dapat ang next article, security by design.
Yeah.
Bye. Itago natin sa pangalang. Bet ni the Cruz and Lito Averia.
Follow through mo yan.
Uy, kayo talaga ang hirap magsulat, lalo na kung may regular na deadline. Kaya ako napapagalitan kasi pag may deadline, hindi ko masapilitang pigain yung utak ko. Ang hirap mag-isip.
Pero kita mo naman yung commitment ni Chairman Mon, di ba? May oras pa siya para magsulat. No? So,
Correct. Saludo po kami sa inyo. Saludo po kami sa inyo, Chairman Mon.
Hindi pa natin siya niimbitahan dito So, again,
imbitahan natin.
Oo nga. Tama.
Basta timing natin yan. Okay, ito yung next. Si Attorney Jam naman. Again, another prolific writer. No? So, daming talaga ni Attorney Jam. Ito naman, thank you, Melvin Karimag of NewsBites and Tech Sabado. Hey, Melvin and Jean, shout out sa inyong dalawa. Salamat din sa pag-post mo dito sa NADPOP Video Central. Okay? And then, sinagot ni Attorney Jam, our credit card details sensitive personal information. Yeah. So, again, sino nakabasa? Sino naman nakabasa sa inyo?
Hindi, siyempre, para sa akin, sensitive yan. No?
Correct.
First, in Jam's article, he first went through the definition of personal information and then sensitive personal information. And then he linked it with, yung batas, yung about credit cards. No? That credit card information should be treated with full confidentiality. And kung confidential information, then sa privacy naman, that would be considered sensitive personal information. To me, opinion ko, sensitive personal information yan.
Correct. Kasi nandun yung pangalan and tapos unique yung credit card number mo. So you can tie up the two as a permanent relationship, di ba? So,
right.
So magkasamang dalawang information, that means it's personal information. Uy, nga pala, kung nakita niyo yung mga bagong credit card, hindi ko sasabihin yung brand, wala na yung number sa harap, nasa likod na.
Ay, yung yung three digit.
Hindi, yung
16 digit
mismo.
Yung card number mo.
Oo, nasa likod na lang ngayon.
Bagong design, no?
Lala.
Hindi ako nakasama ng credit card habit eh. Ano, tumataas ba yung incidences of fraud ngayon? I don't know, I don't monitor the reports, no?
True. Totoo yan, Sam. Kasi, it's hitting closer to home. Ang dami kong kakilala na have been victimized. Maliliit yung amount, hindi malaki. So, ginagawa yata nila ngayon alam mo yung lumang kwento?
Ang tawag niya
Sino nga yun?
Nag-scheme na sila.
Anong Superman number yon, yung nandiyo si Richard Pryor na nagnanakaw lang siya ng cent for every account, so hindi napapansin. But when you collect it, diba, million yung lumalabas. Ganun yung ginagawa nila ngayon.
Parang yan yung sa insider fraud din sa bangko, yung may control sa processing system. Pag nag-compute ng interest, any digit yung dinadrop mo sa round off, you put it into one account.
Correct.
Diba? Eventually, pag naipon mo yun, million yun.
Correct. Sa Tagalog yung kurot, pero yung term dyan, skimming. So it's one way. It's meant to hide the fraud. Kasi nga kung hindi ka diligent sa credit card bills mo, pwedeng lumusot yun eh.
At saka sobrang liit, Sam eh. Ako, I'm a victim. Nag-donate ako ng $5 sa isang high school alumni association sa Jamaica, man. Jamaica, man. So, hindi ko napansin eh. Kasi, di ba? Maliit yung value eh. So, talagang sa dami ng puro grab. Hindi ko na makita yung isa. So ganun yung mga modus kayo, no? Maliliit, tama si paring Sam. Kurot, pero pag dumami, pantal.
Isang milyong kurot yun, Abet. At, di ba? So, 1 million times yung amount na kinukurot ko.
Correct. Ingat.
Lalo na ngayon, meron akong kaibigan dito sa village, nireport niya, yung kanyang card na clone sa isang gasoline station naman. So, hindi ko na may doon. So, nalaman na lang niya nung merong, it was tracked doon. So, ingat po.
The weakest link.
Ang guidance ng credit card companies is never to let go of your credit card out of sight. Tapos, pag yung ini-scan na or yung card dapat nasa harapan mo kasi after all wireless na ngayon yung device.
Most pero marami hindi.
Ayun na nga.
Like, ang init-init sa labas amoy gas pa lalabas ka ng aircon mong kotse.
Ay nako.
Yun ang risk. That's the risk that you take.
That's as Attorney Kixel pointed out, the weakest link yung manual and yung humans.
Yeah.
Yan ang delikado yan. Pwede ma-wipe out yung credit limit mo.
Oh yes.
Actually maganda tong sa pang aspect ng question ni Jam na ko is ano talaga yung scope ng fourth definition ng sensitive personal information? Does that cover privileged information? Kasi privileged information is confidential. Parang yung credit card details, confidential. Then again, everything inside, because of the Data Privacy Act, all data is confidential na rin. So ano ba yung ibig sabihin ng required by law to become classified? Kasi iba rin definition yan. May document classification system yung government. May top secret, top secret classified, may for general distribution. Yun ba yung ibig sabihin nun? Can't say.
Correct.
Sa fintech, si Don Di Mapang pala is with a credit card company. So, tunin natin yung kanyang rito. Yeah, thank you again, Melvin, for posting this, and then for alam ko column ni si Attorney Jam ng News Bites. He has a weekly column. I'm not sure kung weekly itong kanyang incognito column sa newsweb.ph. Okay. Next naman ako, itong ating kaibigan si Oliver Besa. Yan. Thank you very much for posting yan. GRC training o GRCP training. Parang ito sa brand nila, no? Brand dito ng DP EX Network, Core Management Compliance Professional Training sa YouTube. Marami pong mga free trainings na pinopost ang ating kaibigan si Oliver Besa from States Interactive, no? Sabi nga namin, Oliver, baka overquota ka na, ha? So, yeah, thank you for all of this content that you share with our community. And the speaker here is Celine Chu, Head of Learning and Development ng States Interactive. So, salamat. Okay. Ito yung ating last update. Kinamili lang tayo talaga from Manuel Caliwan. Manny, thank you. Ito, Attorney Kiko, mga favorite na mo. The world as seen from Paris, based on CNIL, French Data Privacy Authority, the Philippines doesn't ensure an adequate level of data protection recognized by the European Union. So, Philippines have authority and laws, but it is not enough. Yan. So, you see more niya yung in details, no? So I'm sure you've seen it. Okay. Attorney Kiko, kung gusto mong sabi nga nila, bakit ganun ang tingin ng mga French?
Pourquoi, mon ami? Pourquoi?
The French kasi have a lot of enforcement activities. And they have a lot more enforcers than we do. Ano lang eh. I think part of it is capacity. With DBM sana, if instead of cutting the budget, no, for the hospitals, di ba? Sana yung katiting lang ng budget na yun yung budget ng NPC. So they could use a lot more investigators, they could use a lot more enforcers na yung umiikot talaga at pagsasara ng business kasi nagva-violate ng data protection. So that's one of the factors. I think though na if what we're really looking for are the fines. So if the fines come out and then they start acting on the fines, ayan, we can say na we've reached some level of adequacy. Also, pagdating from our lateral enforcement, if you are dealing with a business that isn't data privacy compliant, edi tapos na, hindi na kayo makikipag-business doon. That will be the big test actually. If we start going to that level na hindi yan compliant, saka na yan, DQ na yan sa ating procurement system.
And ito, no? I mean, this is a country reputation management, di ba?
Isa pa yan.
Some of us may not see this as important in geopolitics or global trade, but tingnan nyo, I mean, countries are looking at us. Ito nga, this is from the French, the French NPC, the first version of the NPC. And ito yung tingin nila sa Pilipinas, no? So, again, they may be ahead of us because EU has GDPR, which was built on top of several privacy laws already. But this is how other countries proceed. And it's actually an action point, for us.
Pero sayang nga because yung first model na tiningnan yung is the EU Data Protection Directive, yung predecessor ng GDPR. And we basically modeled our law, yung Data Privacy Act, dun sa EU Data Protection Directive. Napasukan na lang ng ibang framework yan at a later stage eh. Pero sayang pa rin. Kasi nga, the reason why we wanted to come up with the Data Privacy Act is so that we can trade with the European countries covered by the then European Data Protection Directive. So this has trade implications as well, no? Sa atin. We might lose, halimbawa, kung nagsa-service yung BPOs natin dito sa ng European contracts, naka-BPO sila. Sayang yun.
Pero actionable naman eh. Kasi yung again, back by data naman yung analysis ng CNIL sa Philippines eh. So pwede pa, di ba? This can be acted on. And it's
Yes.
within our
Nung sinasabi ni Attorney Kicks yung enforcement, biglang, tumakbo yung imagination ko na Data Privacy Police.
Yeah. Actually, that's what we need.
Mm-hmm.
Ano
Sige,
kaya
Abel.
yung uniform nila? Ano kaya
Volunteer
yung uniform nila?
Magpa-deputize na lang tayo sa NPC, di ba? Data Privacy Enforcers. Kasi
Yan.
baka maglabas na naman sila ng fake Data Privacy Enforcers.
Ayan.
DPE! Okay.
Pwede rin Data Privacy Police. So, ganda rin. So, yun, mag-i-rest natin si Segmon, tanungin natin kung yung mga possibilities niyan, di ba? But, at again, attorney, from a legal perspective, can the NPC deputize? Di ba? Sinasabi mo nga, kulang sa plantilla or walang headcount, di ba?
The NPC can do whatever it wants. Dapat naman yung powers niya. It's up to their imaginations na lang and how to use quote-unquote force multipliers. So, bahala sila.
Dapat gawa tayo ng episode niya, yung Data Privacy Police. So,
Diba si Tanod?
Sam, alam ko na bakit puting uniform pumasok sa isip ko.
Bakit?
Dream Police cheap trick. Pasintabi na po sa millennial, sorry.
Music na naman yan, di ba? Okay, ito po ang ating huling update. Marami pa po doon. Napuntahan niyo po yung mga Facebook pages na pinakita namin, groups. Yung nga, so, Privacy PH, siyempre NPCs, Facebook page, yung NADPOP DPOs. Of course, yung DICT Cybersecurity, So, ang ganda ng kanilang mga initiatives, despite the pandemic, tuloy-tuloy pa din ang kanilang tutok, di ba, sa cybersecurity ng buong Pilipinas. Okay? Yan. So, patapos na naman po ang isang Privacy Fridays at FightBack Cybersecurity. Episode 12 na tayo. Well, technically, episode 15 dapat, no? But, isang dosena na tayong official, And thank you again, Lito Averia, for that back-to-back episodes 11 and 12 teaching, So, alam ko marami ka man nakatago sa call mo.
Marami pang nakatago.
Tipo, 1960s pa, susulat na ako.
Panahon pa ni William Howard Taft, kita mo? Gano'ng katanda kaya yung baul na pinagkunan?
Hindi. Bakit senior pa galing yun? Nalito.
Hoy, I still have presentations that goes back before the turn of the century.
Ako. Gusto kong makita 'yon. At least for nostalgia sake, gusto kong makita kung ano yung what was Lito Averia thinking in that particular stage of his life. Yeah.
Basically, di ba yung start ko nga sa InfoSec is business continuity.
Correct.
So most of the present was on business continuity.
Pero di ba mga big iron pa to mga mainframes, mini, right, di ba?
Of course. Yes.
Those were the days, no? Dito.
Paano mo si-secure yun? Sakay mo ng truck, kailangan mo ng forklift.
Meron tayong bagong listeners, Attorney Omar Sana ng DICT. Yan, so ayan, nagka-NCERT cyber drill sila last week for banks, insurance, finance, telecoms, and CII, Thank you, Attorney Omar, for that. May comment siya dito.
Attorney Omar. Ayan.
1978.
Tama.
Yan ang concept. Inabit comment sa inyo ni Attorney Omar ito. Ayan, may PowerPoint daw ba noon nung
ano yan? Hindi Microsoft yun. Lotus. Ano nga yun?
Lotus 1, 2, 3.
Hindi. Lotus rin yung may gawa. Maaalala ko rin po yun. Pero,
Correct.
Ayun yung araw, yung storyboard.
Yan, magkasama yun.
Acetate pa yun.
Acetate. Ilipat lang mga
May overhead
storyboard.
Tapos yung mga pictures sa slide projector.
Baka shadow play pa yon dito yung ginagawa mo.
Attorney, bago na makalimutan, kudos po sa inyong NCERT drill. Kailangan po natin talaga yung drill na yan. The more drills we do, katulad yan discussion natin last time, the better we get at in doing our incident response. Thank you po, thank you.
Sakto, salamat doon, no? Again, isa sa mga planned guest din natin yung DICT Cybersecurity team. So we can have them in one of our episode. Okay, we're at the tail end already. My fellow host, again, same question. What are the two things, one from the talk and one from the updates that struck you the most? Yan, sinong gustong mauna? Dun sa data lifecycle, tapos sa ating mga updates, ano yung paborito nyo? Yan.
Una na ako.
Yan, sige.
Yung na-take ko dun sa sa life cycle, yung deletion talaga ang sobrang overlooked ang deletion sa kultura natin, and kung daming excuse. But if you're the DPO, that's something you have to focus on. That's part of the change management and cultural approach na you have to really fight for. Ayan. And then sa updates, tawag to, yung sa post ni Attorney Jam on food for thought talaga yon, kasi ang daming implications ng kung ano yung kalalabasan nun. So hopefully may issuance si NTC clarifying that, or or we see something that gives it greater clarity. Yun nga po.
Yung karugtong nun, Attorney Kicks, is yung tinutulak na update, amendment to the Data Privacy Act. Baka ma-cover din yun if we come up with the definitions, di ba, of what constitutes sensitive personal information. That actually can be included in the amendment.
Sana nga we just follow the GDPR na lang, na there's categories of personal information, what constitutes personal information. Tapos may special categories of personal information, ganun na lang. Tapos may extra ka lang, not this two-tiered system na, well.
Correct. May comment from Attorney Sana. 200 pala yung participants na doon sa kanilang cyber trail, no? So siguro magandang okay natin it, no? That's a good number, And then critical financial institutions, no? May comment pa siya. Clarify niya.
Baka pwedeng i-summarize po niyo yung
highlights,
what transpired, highlights.
And comment from Attorney, our government division rules still hinge on MC78, 1964, assurance pa niya ni former President Marcos. And sabi nga niya, yan, it's an ego to change yan.
Kasi parang yung sa NTC na circular number 2016-01, hindi pa yung deletion rules will still eventually fold into yung yung EO na yun. So hindi pa masyadong lalo na for paper.
So kung EO, mas madali ang EO kaysa law, di ba? So pwedeng palitan na yun.
Mas madali ang EO kaysa law. Isang lang yan, actually pwedeng DICT pwedeng gumawa ng
draft.
Draft.
Ng EO mismo.
Power,
Pwedeng gawin, i-prepare ng DICT, tapos itulak nila through the NSIA.
Pwede rin. Many ways to skin that cat.
NSIA is the National Cybersecurity Interagency Task Force, or Council.
Mga low-hanging fruit to, na madaling gawin, di ba?
Pipirmahan po kagad yan.
And
pandagdagan niya sa tickbox.
Pirma ng PRD.
Of course, need daw ng pirma ng PRD. Of course, kung yung EO yung ruta na kukuhanin, again, like I said, pwedeng i-draft ng DICT, pwede natin tulungan, and then i-push via the National Cybersecurity Interagency Council, endorsed to the President for his signature. So yun yung madaling rota kaysa yung batas. Okay?
Mm.
But continuing on with the comment nga, I agree with, well, same din yung ko, no? Yung kay Attorney Kicks. It's yung deletion sa data life cycle kasi nga, that's what I find that is quite often missed by a lot of organizations. Even do sa consulting ko nga, yan din yung lagi kong ini-stress is deletion and destruction ng data once the purpose for which it was collected and processed has been met. So kailangan cautious ka doon. Tapos yun nga, yung sa credit card details, no? Again, it's linked to the possible amendment ng Data Privacy Act. But I don't think that amendment, we will see that in this Congress, baka next Congress na.
Yeah, wala na, too late na.
Very tight, very tight na yan.
Hindi, wala pa nga sa committee.
Yep.
Saka nagsimula na election, di ba? Kampanya, di ba?
Wala na.
Filing ng certificates of candidacy, October 1 to 8.
Yan na. One month ago. 1 month and 5 days lang. Magkakaroon tayo ng episode on privacy and elections. Okay? So, hintayin niyo po yan. Masarap ang pag-usapan yan. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Attorney Kicks and Don Lito. So, ako, mainig pa rin. Umuulan yan, Sis Arn, pero okay lang. Ambient noise naman yan eh.
Yeah, okay.
Umuulan pa.
Okay na? Okay na. Hindi na gaanong maingay? Okay, yeah, my take, ako, na-realize ko sa episode na to. So, as usual, thank you. Thank you kay Attorney Kiko and kay Sir Averia. At sa aking classmate, kasi behave siya ngayon, no? Marami kaming natutunan. One is, yeah, for those who are having a hard time formulating their privacy notice, nakita ko na pwedeng gamitin yung CURDD na yung Data Lifecycle framework para mag-guide ka doon. So, sabi ni Attorney Kiko, that is the start. Pero I think yun yung simplified na para makagawa ka nga talaga. Kasi ang iba nahihirapan to construct privacy notice di ba? So, to simplify it, related to the data lifecycle. Then, the other one is, na walang shortcut sa data privacy and data lifecycle. So, you have to be committed talaga. Yung accountability nga, dapat laging nandun kasi ito, ginagawa lang natin siyang light at masaya yung discussion. Pero this one is a serious topic, no? Pag dinidiscuss natin siya na, serious na siya. Pero we make it simplified at naiintindihan talaga nung ating mga ka-BounceBack, no? So, sa mga nakikinig sa atin. So yeah, you have to be always intentional. No? Pag hindi ka talaga intentional, walang impact, walang mangyayari. So, thank you dito sa session na to. And then dun sa updates, yeah, interested ako dun sa data privacy by designs for developers. Yun. So, yun ang gusto kong ma-discuss din natin. No? That is a very good topic din. Okay. Yeah, that's it for me.
Hindi natin topic yan dito.
Oo. Privacy and security by design na para
isa pang takeaway, dapat lagi dun sa framework ng data lifecycle, nasabi daw laging naka-integrate si data privacy and ethics at laging tatandaan nandun sa baba or I don't know, we can make a framework na nakapaikot din doon yung security. Ayun. So, wag kakalimutan yun. Kasi sa Privacy Fridays, laging may kasamang FightBack Cybersecurity. Ayan.
Ang galing sa segue. Ang galing sa segue.
Yung sound effects mo.
Oo nga.
Wala pang sound effects. Yan.
Talagang special, Special talaga si Professor.
Go, Abet.
Abet,
Actually, both ethics and security plays a big role in the entire life cycle. Kasi, the only way you protect personal information or sa dalawang tier natin, Attorney Kicks, personal information and sensitive personal information is by security controls. Okay? Either a policy security control or a technical security control. And na-mention rin natin kanina in the discussion yung encryption, no? Which is a good point actually if you think about encryption kasi when all else fails, your security system fails or everything, yung huling sasalo sa'yo yung encryption. If you encrypt down to the data level, di ba, kahit ma-breach ang firewall, ma-breach yung server, but if your data is encrypted, ano nga yun, attorney, at rest,
Yes.
meron pa nga in transit, and yung ibang sophisticated, even in use, may applications
In
that actually
process,
even
meron din.
So medyo high-tech siya, pero that came to my mind earlier when it was mentioned. It's because it's kind of your last tool for defense in case of data breaches. That's why it's emphasized in the law. So yun, and then yung the data privacy viewpoint of Paris with regards to the Philippines. Nagdalawang isip ako kasi sa cybersecurity index, we are perfect 20 points sa legislation. No, so parang nung binabasa ko, so bakit ganun? And then true enough, tama si Attorney Kicks, yung enforcement. Yung enforcement nga yung kulang, and that is an area that even though we have the laws, of course, having the law is different than actually enforcing it. We all know that. It could use some more, how do you call it, like action, action in terms of the enforcement. Yeah. So yeah, and yung sa DICT, I'm glad we're moving towards a common criteria compliance for information security devices. We sorely need that. Yun.
Akala ko highlight mo yung yung comment ni Professor Arnie. Ako nag-aabit.
Actually, ang maganda yung fruit of the poison tree.
Yo.
Di ba?
Ni
That's
William
the
Howard
word.
Taft. Ni William Howard Taft.
Ni William Howard Taft.
Grabe yung dito. Ayan, so, yung sa akin naman, I mean, same comment ni Attorney Kick sa ni Don Vito. Yan ang tawag kay Lito eh. So, we tend to forget yung deletion, And there are several reasons why eh. Kasi minsan ito yung pwedeng yung owner of that project nag-resign or lumipat, diba? Nakakalimutan na yung nakakalimutan ng tapusin yung yung life cycle for a specific project. Kaya po, fellow DPOs, ensure na merong continuity. For example, if one of your internal PICs, yung owner ng specific process na yon, halimbawa nagkaroon ng change of staff, kailangan alam nyo na dapat makompleto yung data lifecycle. And ako nagustuhan ko talaga that dito map it with yung transparency with unit purpose. In fact, ang dami mo pwedeng i-cross reference sa data lifecycle, di ba? So yun, data class, data asset, etc. Ethics na sinabi ni Professor Arnie Marcelo. So marami talaga. Maganda siyang gawing parang framework. Well, framework na din si 5 pillars, di ba? Pero ito pala meron din tayo palang 5 pillars ng data lifecycle na sinimplify niya.
Kaya Sam, pag dinonate mo yung laptop mo, siguraduhin mo, burahin mong mabuti.
Definitely. Bibila ko ng hard drive para
yung data deletion po for hard drive is not expensive at all. Zero cost. Meron pong mga open source software, matutuwa si paring Engel sa akin. Marami po open source software that can do military grade erasure. Ayan. So, yan. Yun lang po.
Sige, sakto yan.
Okay. I-message kita sa group chat natin mamaya, kailangan ko nun.
Actually, may application within Microsoft Explorer, sa Explorer window mismo. Right-click mo lang siya, parang delete. And it will do yung number of passes that you configure it to. So, yung gusto mong ma-delete forever, yun. Doon mo ilalagay sa bin na yon. Huwag sa recycle bin.
Yes.
Tama.
Uy, may pahabol na comment si Attorney Omar Sana. Ayan, kulang tayo policy-wise global cybersecurity index, but the ICT is working on it, sir. And tama-tama. Salamat po sa update. Attorney Sana of the ICT, Yung doon naman sa natuwa ako na maraming tayong content creators for data privacy and cybersecurity. Yung nga, may column si Chairman Mon, di ba? May column si Attorney Jam. Ito po, this additional content. 5 taon pa lang po yung implementation ng batas sa atin. And we encourage you to write or to have a blog or to even have a podcast on data privacy. Kasi nga po yung body of knowledge natin, dito tayo natututo eh. This is how we learn. And yun po, request ko rin, sana write it in the vernacular, no? Wag kang mahirap magsulat sa Filipino or even sa Bisaya or sa Ilonggo, no? But try to write it kasi nga po, dapat maintindihan talaga ng ating mga kababayan. Yung nakailangan nilang, na meron silang karapatan para sabi nga simula ni, to control their personal information. Yun po, pag doon pa lang po, panalo na tayo. Naturuan natin ang isa't isa. Now, we actually control our personal information. Abet, may comment ka?
Naisip ko lang kasi, di ba, same sa paggawa ng data privacy notice. Ano yung Attorney Geeks? Huwag niyong pasusulat sa lawyer. So yung presentation niyo po para maging clear and concise, huwag niyo pasusulat sa lawyer.
Yung privacy notice sa amin, pinapadaan ko sa marketing. Hindi ako ang final say. Para consistent.
Yung customer care ng marketing, doon. Correct.
Hindi kami. Siyempre, babalik siya sa akin to check for completeness. Pero yung yung word usage, yung
Huwag na po kayo gumamit ng mga words tulad ng abysmal. Yan. Yung mga
Saka yung mga wear us at wear off.
Ay, nako.
Yun, lalo na.
Will and shall dito, will and shall.
Ayan.
May debate yan, yung will and shall.
yung ibang privacy notice kasi talagang halatang sinulat ng lawyer. That's not, if you need to write something na ganong ka-detailed, keep the essence of it. Yun yung ilagay mo sa ibabaw. And then say that if they need more, pumunta sila sa privacy notice sa website ninyo. And then dun sa privacy notice na website ninyo, may layers yan. Kung ano yung nasa ibabaw, mababaw lang siya, and then you can drill down. That's a separate course.
Good point po. Good point po ni Attorney Kicks. Yung privacy notice, summary yan ha. Summary yan. Hindi mo dapat isaksak lahat ng pwede mo isaksak doon. Yung mga importanteng bagay lang. And then, lagyan mo ng link or refer to the policy. Correct.
By the way, may klase si Attorney Kiko sa Enderan this October. Okay?
Yes, meron.
Wala tayong date, wala akong poster but we can in next episode we're going to promote that. Yun po, matututunan niyo yan. Yung yung strategy for a privacy notice that can be understood. Ano ba yung natin level of by a 5th grader ba or by a 5-year-old? Ano ba yung dapat nating
It depends on your data subject.
Okay.
The important part is your data subject, whoever it is, naintindihan niya. Kung yung data subjects mo, panay abogado, hindi sa abogado mo pasulatin.
So customized and personalized, yung pala yung message doon, di ba? Attorney Kicks, no? This is the age of personalization. Professor Arnie, meron din akong again, we mentioned yung content creation. Yung universities, I'm sure marami ding gumagawa ng research sa data privacy and cybersecurity. Kaya ayan, maganda rin na makikita natin yan.
Pero hindi pa ganun kadami. I would say hindi pa ganun kadami. So, konti pa lang din nagkaka-interest nun. Kasi kung meron na, sana marami tayong na-represent na mga ganun, yung mga researches.
Napin natin,
let's see.
researchgate.net something. Yung mga yan.
Hanap tayo.
Okay, may last comments kay Atty. Sana yan. Ang dami niyong content, dami kong kailangan basahin, dinagdagan yung trabaho ko. Tsaka na, Atty. Kaya nga ganito yung format natin. We have a teaching and update format. Kaya umabot tayo minsan ng more than 2 hours, like ngayon.
Yung
best na.
Okay na.
Episode natin, 3 hours na tayo. Again, so September 3, it's the 3rd night of September. Do you remember? So, dito na po tayo sa may pahabol din si Maricel. Another great session. Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you, panel. Happy weekend.
Maraming salamat.
Thank you.
Thank you po. Thank you.
Happy weekend to everyone. Pasensya na po, minsan makain kami ng biskwit.
Nagnanakaw kami ng subo.
Casino, Ernie Imperial, yan. Thank you for the great session. Learned a lot. So, see you again next episode. Ano? So marami
Ernie,
tayo.
thank you.
Tayo ni Ernie.
Magandang gabi, The Emperor. No? So,
Okay.
pwedeng data ethics. Tingnan na pa natin kung sino sa mga host ang gusto mag or if we can have a guest, no? Tingnan natin, di ba? Lalo ng data ethics.
Mag-guest naman tayo para mawala yung umay nila sa atin.
Tama.
Di ba?
Baka magpatay na tayo ng buhok or magsuot tayo ng wig next time.
Pwede.
Pwede tayo mag-cosplay pag malapit
Costume.
ng gusto
Tama.
nyo, di ba?
Privacy Fridays cosplay edition.
Pwede. Or
Pwede.
magsuot tayo ng hat, iba-ibang hat, di ba? So, again, to make our sessions live there. Kung may mga sponsors na, pwede na tayo magparakol, di ba? So,
correct. Yung laptop sa likod ni Attorney Kicks, paparaffle natin.
Hindi lang para may 3 dishes, no? Okay, once again, thank you very much, colleagues. No? So, again, salamat sa inyong surveys. Again, this is a pro bono. Pro bono, abono, ano po namin to para po matuto tayong lahat para protektahan ng mga customers natin, lalo na kanilang personal information. Again, once again, on behalf of the founder of BounceBack Network, Jason De La Rosa, again, friends of the BounceBack Network, and of course, colleagues at NADPOP and PH-CERT, and of course, our friends at Bluepoint Foundation. Magandang gabi and salamat again. See you next week, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Okay?
Happy weekend.
Happy weekend.
Magandang gabi. Salamat. Bye.
Bonjour.
Bonjour sa ating mga festivals.
Aloha.